inclusion of me in the curation of Ben Russell and Basma al-Sharif films is a lot like inclusion of Richard Pryor in Ben Russell's Trip series. Obviously, it makes no sense when you look at it out from the outside, but from the inside it makes perfect sense. Ben Russell found a way to include Richard Pryor's comedy routines in his Trip series, and it took him a while to find a proper place for that inclusion. It took him a while, allegedly, as he claimed in his interviews, to find the proper use for the concert footage of Richard Pryor. So eventually, I guess Ben Russell is the best person to explain how he managed to fit me in this very rich imaginarium of his work, and especially because of his internationally acclaimed curator practice. So I will try to give my own explanation of how I ended up hosting these films. I think that the gods of alternative cinema, the gods of surrealism, experimentation, ethnographic cinema, were actually very unhappy with the previous films that I hosted in a Kinemastic Cinema Club. Those films were Hollywood fare, probably not the most famous mainstream films ever made, but each one of those films eventually did attempt to communicate with the mainstream audience, included major stars, very conventional three-act structures and plot lines, even in case of Hickey and Boggs, which remains pretty cryptic as a feature film, even though I believe authors didn't intend it to be cryptic. This is why Gods of Alternative Cinema decided to bring you back to this path that is already taken by Kinemastic, and that's the intense alternative cinema presented by major authors of that form. Tonight I will screen films by Ben Russell and Basma al-Sharif. These two authors do have a lot in common, but also I think that their films are completely different in stylistic terms. Ben Russell is extremely intuitive. He notices interesting phenomena, interesting people, interesting events, and then he gets inspired by those events and tries to present them in the entirety of their presence. So in the films that he presents tonight, we have two of his works that are more along the lines of historical avant-garde stuff that is not too dissimilar to things that, for example, Kenneth Anger managed to really include in the canon of cinema history. And one of his work is closer to Jean Rouch, the famous ethnographic filmmaker. Even though, compared to Jean Rouch, I think that Ben Russell is closer to the artistic approach when it comes to ethnographic cinema than to scientific approach. And I think that in this whole body of work of ethnographic cinema, I think that Ben Russell is far more interested in the artistic part of that array of possibilities within that form than towards scientific part. On the other hand, in his Trip series, he manages to capture really interesting transcendent fragments that are very reminiscent to many occasions and many instances in our own lives where we notice an interesting phenomena and just focus on it and try to figure it out. Keep looking at it, trying to find different elements, some sense in it. And I think that in his Trip series, Ben Russell made actually maybe the ultimate stoner films ever, because he managed this sense of what he claims to be secular rapture or secular transcendence and spiritual experience. And that really is the fact. Focusing on these objects, on these seemingly common process, actually leads to a sort of transcendence. And we are lucky that Ben Russell has a keen eye to understand such things and realize their potential. Basma Sharif, on the other hand, has a far more aggressive approach when it comes to editing. She uses a lot of tricks, she uses text, she experiments with language, and she tries to be topical in terms of subject matter and in terms of this sort of ideological position of her films, while in the same time she avoids presenting the actual conflict or the actual ideological contradiction that she is addressing. So her films are more abstract. Her films focus on a lot of different details, a lot of different processes. Her films really vary when it comes to stuff that is presented on screen. So she's sort of an opposite to Ben Russell's approach. I find this mix of Ben's and Basma's films very intriguing, and I guess it will keep you very focused and very alert throughout this evening. I recognize a lot of very strong historical influences in terms of historical avant-garde in these films. I think that alternative films in contemporary climate, even though I'm not a huge expert on it because I'm really deeply rooted in narrative cinema, and I think that my choice of films previously really adds to that attitude, and I do not consider myself a great expert on it, but what I feel about contemporary to alternative cinema is that it eventually shows us different paths that cinema could have taken if it weren't for a series of contingent events that eventually resulted in cinema as it is today, where feature films and feature-length fiction is considered to be the form which is in highest regard. Of course, we can always say that documentaries, short films, alternative films, experimental films are obviously in high regard as well. But when you talk about movies to people, what they initially feel is the topic that you're addressing. When you say film, people usually think of feature-length fiction first. However, film appeared, and it was initially set up as a scientific innovation. Then it turned into a circus attraction. Afterwards, it turned into entertainment, and I think that even today, film is mostly entertainment, and sometimes it manages to turn into something else. It manages to transcend and turn into a work of art. but also at the same time I don't think that all of the art house films, films that attempt to end up as works of art actually manage to become valuable in aesthetic terms. Thus, films by Basma and Ben are interesting because they are rooted in historical avant-garde. There are a lot of classic avant-garde devices that are used in these films. But on the other hand, these films really show us an alternative reality of film. Because I think that it was just up to a couple of contingent events that pointed film this way, and that film could have been very easily, as a term, associated with stuff like the work you could have seen tonight if things went the other way around. So I, as a narrative filmmaker, as a screenwriter who really delves into genre, into narrative stuff, into more conventional cinematic experiences, I'm always really open to experimental work, and I like to explore it because it shows me a new way of approaching cinema, and at the same time it shows me new ways of presenting certain emotions, certain political stands, or certain events. And even though these films are very avant-garde, surreal, with a touch of ethnography, obviously, I also think these films are very interesting, even for those people who are involved in narrative cinema, because a lot of the emotions and a lot of things that they convey can be really interesting as a new tool for filmmakers who are involved in a more mainstream narrative form. I'm not really crafty when it comes to making subtitles. I wanted to add them to this presentation and most probably put some completely different stuff into those subtitles in order to make it look a bit more like Basma's work. But then in the end I decided to make it a single take, a lot like stuff that Ben does, and hopefully this will remind you of their style when you look at it. I would like to thank Ben for inviting me to present tonight's program. I'm absolutely sure you will enjoy it, and hopefully this program will cleanse you from all the impure mainstream Hollywood stuff that I imposed on you in previous weeks. My name is Dimitrije Vojnov. I'm a Serbian screenwriter and a former film critic. Enjoy.